Thank you, Alan. I've only become chairman of the British Ukraine Parliamentary Group since July, when I took over from John Grogan, and I've visited Kiev 3 times, so my breadth and depth of knowledge is nothing like as great as the other 3 speakers on your panel this afternoon, and so I shall keep my remarks relatively brief. The first thing that I can say on behalf of the parliamentary group here is that we have been struck, and the Ambassador mentioned this at the close of his remarks, about the immense warmth towards Britain that exists in the UK, and there is a genuine wish to strengthen the relationship between our 2 countries. And it is notable that in the Ukrainian Parliament, or rather the equivalent of the group we have here, the Ukraine-Britain Friendship Group, is the 3rd strongest in the Parliament. We are establishing very good links with members on both sides of all sides of the political divide. The group, of course, has to be non-political in terms of the internal debate taking place within the Ukraine. But I would just make 1 or 2 observations on the basis of what I've seen since I've been doing this. The first is that the Ukraine was hit very severely in the economic crisis, more severely than almost anywhere, and the consequence of that is that very hard decisions are having to be taken. That is something which in this country we have a certain degree of sympathy with them. But I have been encouraged by the willingness of the government to take what are inevitably going to be very unpopular economic decisions, and I hope that they will be able to carry those through in the same way that it is likely to cause unpopularity and some protest, and that we may experience that here with some of the hard decisions we're having to take. But the determination, I think, is encouraging. In the longer term, something David Clark touched on in his remark, we were looking at the potential which exists for economic reform and economic growth in the Ukraine. And one of the things that struck me was that the Ukraine is almost like the Gulf states when they first discovered they were sitting on oil. There is an enormous resource in Ukraine, which is not just potentially of enormous benefit to the country, but to the whole of the world, and that is the agricultural capacity which exists there. And if that can be exploited properly, then that will be of huge importance, I think, to the world. And it requires investment. One of the things which I think we can help do is to try and bring the investment which is required into the Ukraine in order to exploit to the full the potential of Ukrainian agriculture. Inevitably, economic reform is going to have to be linked to political reform. The Ambassador touched on the constitutional changes which are being proposed. Again, I certainly wouldn't want to go into detail about that. The only thing I would say is that when I first visited Kiev and talked to members of the Rada and the administration, it became very clear that there was a kind of stalemate in the existing situation, which made it almost impossible to carry out proper radical change. So to that extent, it is plain that the Constitution was not working as it should and needed to be addressed. I was there with the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, where we were trying to help the RADA develop the kind of parliamentary role scrutiny that we have here in the House of Commons. Clearly there does need to be a lot more work to be done to strengthen parliamentary democracy in the Ukraine. Some of the influence of the big business groups at the moment and the methods by which Ukrainian MPs are chosen are rather different to the way in which MPs are elected in this country, and there certainly is scope for some reform there. At the same time, other institutions need reform. Work is being done to strengthen the independence of the judicial system, which is essential if in a mature, functioning democracy. And Helen mentioned my own particular area of interest, which is the media and press freedom. And there too, there is a little way to go. There has been some concern that plurality is diminishing, although David Clark gave a potential answer that that may simply be because the media are rallying behind the government. It always slightly struck me that the one, as it was not being a Ukrainian or Russian speaker, the one journal which I read regularly is the Kiev Post, and I don't think anybody could describe the Kiev Post as being an uncritical supporter of the Ukrainian government. So clearly there's still a bit of plurality, at least in the English language press. But perhaps the most encouraging thing I found was when I went to the Institute of Journalism at the university in Kiev and talked to some of those wishing to become journalists, and the enthusiasm and determination to try and build an investigative, a critical press was enormously encouraging. And so I came away with some optimism about the future. In terms of the international position, the warming of relations between Ukraine and Russia, I think, is something we should welcome. It's obviously sensible, if you happen to be sitting in Ukraine next to Russia, that you do have reasonably good relations with your large neighbour, but I think it is a benefit to us as well. One of the points which was made very strongly to us was that Ukraine, having good relations with both Russia and with the European Union, could almost act as a bridge between the two, and that is something which I think we should encourage. I also share, as the Ambassador said, the eventual aspiration for EU membership. I think that is probably quite a long way off, but there are things that we can do in the meantime to strengthen the relationship, to build on the association agreement that's already in place, to deepen the trade links, and to remove barriers. So I think even if full membership is not an immediate prospect, I think a lot can be done to strengthen the ties between Ukraine and the European Union, and that is something, again, which the group in the UK Parliament will be arguing for and seeking to assist to bring about. That's really all I want to say.
Thank you very much. That's